Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. This episode is entitled Galactic Trap. Before we get started real quick, if you'd like to support Astral Club on Patreon, you get your videos early on Monday. You get an email so we can talk back and forth easily. And you also get some special Patreon content. And if you're interested, there'll be a link in the description. I want to talk a little bit about the reality of time travel before we get into the episode and astral projection. Now, I've read many books on astral projection, and many of them are very good. And certainly we've discussed some in the past, and Robert Monroe is one of them. But there's a very small amount of information about astral time travel. And I know I have discussed this a bit in some very older videos. But if you think about it, if reality is such that all times are occurring just at different energy levels, and that when one is on the astral plane, this is much easier to understand, much simpler, and easier to access, then when one astral projects, one should be able to travel throughout times. Many books talk about dimensional travel and certainly space travel. Some go under the ocean, go into the earth. Many interesting experiences, but there's very little time travel information, and I tripped over it as a kid. Now keep in mind, this is before I even knew what the words astral travel or astral projection even were. I didn't even discover that until I was about 11 years old. So as a kid, I was interested in dinosaurs, like many kids are even today. And they were pictured in my books as a kid as these slow-moving, reptilian-looking creatures. And whenever there was a movie, they'd be plodding along through the frames and boom, boom. And they were like these clumsy creatures. But I wanted to see them. So after many experiments trying to figure out how to do it, I eventually tripped over, probably by accident the first couple times. I was able to project back millions of years into the past. And I landed in this jungle, and after quite a bit of searching, I was able to locate this creature, which kind of looked like a chicken on steroids. And it had these claws and feathers, and was very bird-like and moved very quickly. And after I sighted it and I watched it for a bit and it took off, I returned to my body. Now, unfortunately, it's interesting. I wrote this down on one of my tablets. And recently when we moved, and the move went well, so thank you everybody for your well wishes, we found boxes and boxes of all my tablets where I wrote down all of my experiences going back years. And I remember that particular entry. I don't know if I still have that particular notebook. I couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. But I wrote down that it must have been some sort of a dream, because I saw this creature that didn't look at all like dinosaurs were supposed to look. I mean, for goodness sake, it had feathers. And everyone knows dinosaurs don't have feathers. That was certainly the thought process back then. So I dismissed it. And I remember I stopped doing time travel for some time after that, because I thought perhaps I was just deluding myself. But it certainly is something. And as far as the various powers that you can use during various time travels, whether they're into the past, the present, or the future, it certainly varies. And we have talked about that in the past, and we'll probably talk about it more in the future. But I just wanted to just drop that out there as just kind of a note. Okay, if you recall, at the end of my last experience, Gulam pretty much he gave up on wanting to be a guide in my school because he didn't like my suggestion, apparently, of taking on a female lifetime. So he terminated his application and went and somehow ended up as a advisor to the council. That's all I know. I don't know how he got that position. I know he's very persuasive, though, and he certainly is very intelligent, and so I'm sure he was able to use those qualities. So, but one of the things that my angel told me at the end of that experience was that there was well, let's start with what happened when I went to the council room. I appeared in front of the council room, and off to the side there was my old friend, the master, which I'd rather call him still rather than Gulam, to be honest with you. He was off to the side, just being very impassive. When I showed up, I just glanced at him myself, and the council thanked me for coming and indicated that they had this mission for me. Apparently, they'd received a signal from some galaxy or other, and there was a civilization at the center of this galaxy, or very close to the center. Apparently, they now lived underground for whatever reasons, and they wished to establish a relation or communications with the council. So this signal was sent out and received, and they were going to send me to establish relations. I guess basically because I have demonstrated a certain ability in dealing with some alien cultures, handled myself well, so that maybe it was a test, maybe they just thought I might do a decent job. So the ident was sent along with the signal. I use the word ident because that was the word that Robert Monroe used when he discussed how to get to certain places and times in his books. And I don't have a better word, so I'd rather use it. Now, as he defined ident, and when we're talking about astral projection, is essentially, it's like coordinates, but the coordinates aren't just spatial. They're also time and dimension, which is one of the reasons why it's difficult sometimes to meet somebody on the astral plane, because you not only have to get to the right space, you got to get to there in the right time and the right energy level or dimensional plane. So there's a couple of different things. So Monroe used the word ident as a way to describe that locating process. So I figured I'd use his word because I really don't have a better one. So they gave me that ident, and when you have it, it's really just, it's like when you concentrate on this ident, you get a sense for where it is you're going. But what it really is it's kind of like a homing beacon, and all you have to do is concentrate on that ident and will yourself there. And that's probably the best way I can describe it. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that's probably the best way I can describe it in English. It's like if you think about a place that you know very well, you've been there many times, you know what it feels like to be there, what the temperature is, what its smell is. Does it smell like your mom's kitchen when she's baking cinnamon muffins? Or does it smell musty? Does it smell dry? What are the kinds of sounds that you hear? All of these things might feed into like a physical ident, for instance. So when you think in your mind, oh, I wish I could go to this place, essentially you're kind of conjuring up what a physical ident is like with all those different factors. So they gave me the ident and wished me well. As I honed in on the ident, at first it felt normal, but as I got closer, it felt stronger and so much more powerfully attractive than I have ever experienced in my life. And I just couldn't wait to see what kind of place this planet was like. Um, I lost consciousness, as I often do in long trips of any sort. And when I regain consciousness, now try to put yourself in my position. Now I'm expecting to materialize either on the surface of a planet or beneath that surface. So I was kind of preparing myself because I have this claustrophobia kind of thing. So I was preparing myself for that. But when I regained consciousness, I was very disoriented because I found myself floating in space. And it took a second for me to get my bearings, and I looked around and I saw an enormous, supermassive black hole. And I was right there. This thing towered over me. And when I turned to the other direction, there was another one. Twin supermassive black holes. Now, first of all, I didn't even know that was possible. I've never seen anything that ever indicated that there'd be more than one. So part of me started thinking that's awful odd. But the next thing is I realized that I couldn't move, that I was being firmly held in this particular space. Now, I wasn't too alarmed because I've traveled in space before. Now, I've never been up close and personal with what must be some sort of supermassive binary black holes in some galactic center. But, I mean, I've traveled through plenty of places in space. I've flown through our own sun, so I wasn't unduly concerned. And I figured that perhaps it was just some side effect of traveling this far, perhaps. And for a minute, I took in the light show because I still had no reason unduly. I figured there was just a mistake. Somebody screwed up. It happens. But I looked around me, and I guess when I think of a black hole, all I ever think of is this black hole in space. But there was this huge light show around these binary black holes. The huge amount of this burning plasma that was circling these twin black holes, and I remember thinking it was quite beautiful. And I wanted to take a second to enjoy it because, as I've said in the past, I've always been very mission oriented, and I've never taken in just the surrounding beauty. So I looked at it a little bit longer. I said, well, this is pretty interesting, but now I have to return to the council and tell them that something went wrong, because I was pretty sure it wasn't me, that I had zoned in on that ident. And when you're doing astral projection long enough, you eventually learn to quiet all the noise, all those extraneous thoughts. So when you concentrate on going somewhere, that is your only thought. One of the biggest enemies of travel and astral projection is our busy minds. And you say, well, I'm going to go and visit my brother's house. But when you're on your way, you think about, oh, I remember my teacher in this grade. And so instead of ending up at your brother's house, you end up at your teacher's house, or you end up back in your old schoolroom. So yeah, you have to train your mind. But I was pretty sure that I hadn't allowed my mind to wander. So I figured somehow the ident must have been screwed up. So I figured, well, let's just return to the council. And I just willed myself back to the council room. In other words, zoning in on that ident. And nothing. Nothing happened. I didn't move. I started getting a little concerned at that point in time. Then I said, okay, let's go back to the conference room where I usually meet my angel. And so I really concentrated on the conference room. And nothing happened. Okay, I said, well, this whole mission is trashed. I'm just going to return to my body. And all you ever have to do to return to your body is just will it. And if you feel any discomfort or fear, you usually get pulled back to your body anyway. So I just willed myself to return to my body. And I thought for a quick second that I had returned, but then I was still trapped in this particular area. I'll be honest, now I started feeling panic rising because I this was something new for me. I had never been able to not move except for one time when my astral body got stuck to this high voltage power substation because I'd gotten too close to it and wanted to examine it because I felt this weird attraction to it. And I got stuck to it for a period of time, which at that point in time told me that the astral body must have some sort of subtle matter to it that is sensitive to electromagnetic fields of some sort. But here I am now, not at a substation on Earth, but stuck between these two supermassive black holes in the middle of some galaxy. I got quiet though, and I just got centered and said, I have to get rid of this panic because that is not going to help me at all. So I thought, what should I do now? If I couldn't move back, perhaps I thought, what if I called for help? But then my next thought was, wait a minute. I don't really understand the nature of this trap or why I'm trapped or how I'm trapped. Do I want to really bring someone else into this same trap? So I decided against that course of action because I didn't want to be responsible for trapping someone else here. As I floated there like some sort of fly in amber or some poor insect caught in a spider's web, helpless to move, I started thinking about my family and my wife and my daughter. I knew they'd both miss me deeply. And then I jokingly thought to myself how pissed off my wife would be because we're not even fully unpacked yet, and now I've checked out. So uh, that, that just thinking about that with my weird personality kind of cheered me up a little bit in a weird way. Next, I started studying the black holes, and I tried to drudge up all the information that I had on them that I'd ever seen in specials or I'd read about. Um, and they have a very interesting, quiet beauty to them if you look at it from that standpoint. And I knew they were ancient. And for a part of me thought, well, geez, if I'm imprisoned here, I suppose there's worse prisons in the universe than being caught in this weird galactic light show. Um, but I wasn't really interested in hanging out too long. And watching those gases spiral around and into these supermassive black holes, I figured it was interesting being here, but I wasn't really interested in eventually following that hot gas into that particular hole either. So I started thinking, I wonder how old these black holes are, for instance. I knew that there was a theory, and it's a pretty strong theory, I believe, nowadays, that that many galaxies are form around supermassive black hole or black holes, I suppose, based on what I was seeing. So that would mean that they would probably predate the formation of a galaxy, which I know would have to make them billions of years old. How many billions? I have no way of knowing. I'm sure scientists probably know more, but sitting there where I was at that point in time, that was about all I could come up with. Now, um, I felt that my astral body was caught. However, I believed that I could probably separate my soul from my astral body. The astral body, my theory, is that it's some form of matter. It's much more subtle than physical matter. Okay, but I believe that it is some form of matter that perhaps one day we'll actually discover and understand. And that's what's being held. I had this feeling that I could separate my soul, like for instance, and go to the mental plane. In the past, on several occasions, I was able to park my astral body and then go into the mental plane as pure consciousness. However, if I did that, that would not free my astral body. And I couldn't return to my physical body without my astral body. So the best I could expect from that process would be short reprieves. I still have to return, and the astral body. I mean, I guess. Listen, if my physical body terminated, I've heard astral bodies existing for another 100 or so years in various cases. So I guess theoretically it could be held here for another 100 or so years. I don't know. Would it still deteriorate like normal ones do, caught in something like this? Who knows? But for me, all this was theory. Because I was not about to abandon my astral or my physical bodies. I still had work to do here on the physical plane. So I had to concentrate and try to return to my physical self with my astral body. And I knew I had to think of something soon because this particular projection was lasting a lot longer than my typical ones did already. And while it's true that if you progress into the future, you can come back to your physical body in the present and only minutes have passed, as far as I knew, the ident that I was given was not a time one. It was strictly spatial locations, and perhaps dimensional, I don't know. But so the clock was ticking. I never knew what it would be like because usually overextending an astral projection in present time isn't a factor because it's not possible. Because generally, all the time, you will be pulled back when time is up. When your physical body says, okay, you've had enough fun. Now we need you here, kind of overseeing things. So I knew it was time to find a way to escape. And then that's when I thought, wait a minute, time. That's the key here. Now, if I couldn't escape in the present here because of this, I don't know, enormous gravitational or electromagnetic field, I don't pretend to know what fields exactly were holding me here between these two supermassive black holes. But if I could travel in time to say before these things were even formed, then that would mean, right, that this gravitational field or electromagnetic field or whatever it is that's holding me would no longer exist because it hadn't existed yet. So perhaps my experience in time travel, something that a lot of other books and a lot of other astral projection folks just don't talk about, perhaps I can use that to escape this maximum security prison that I seemed to be in. So, what I did was I got centered again and I projected myself back about 1 billion years. When I did that, I blanked out for some period of time, and when I reappeared, I was still trapped. Now, things had changed a little bit. One of the supermassive black holes was ejecting material outside of itself and beneath itself in some sort of a jet stream. And that was a very pretty light show. And I watched that for a little bit. But I figured, okay, I mean, obviously, I wanted to test it. But 1 billion years just isn't enough. So next I figured I was going to shoot for 10 billion. And I shot for 10 billion. And after what seemed a very long period of unconsciousness, I appeared again and I was still caught. They were still there. The galaxy that was around me looked different. But these black holes still had me. So I said, okay, enough of this. And now I'm going to go for, I mean, what do scientists say our universe is? They say it's something like 13.78 billion years old or something like that. I said, I'm going to shoot for 13 billion years and hope that that's far enough to escape these two giant wardens that are holding me here in this prison. So I put everything I had in it and projected myself to that 13 billion time frame. And once again, after a period of unconsciousness, I came to and I was overjoyed because I was surrounded by all this burning plasma and energy, but no black holes. So I immediately thought of the first thing I could think of, which was going back to the council chambers. And I did. And I popped up there. And they were quite surprised to see me. They said, "Oh, you're back so soon. Have you accomplished your mission?" And I took a deep breath. I looked over at Gulam, who was still looking on impassively, but I could feel something coming from him. There was some sort of a disturbance, but he's so well shielded, I couldn't interpret what it was. And I said, somebody screwed up because I found myself caught between two supermassive galactic black holes. And no planet, no people. And I know I didn't make a mistake. So, yeah, you might want to look into, what kind of messages you're getting in the future or who you're getting them from. And I kind of gazed over at the side where, Gulam / the master was hanging out. But I didn't have any proof. So I figured now was not the right time to start throwing accusations out there because I might just look like somebody who had panicked or who had made a mistake and now I'm trying to make up for it, trying to excuse myself. So I said, well, the head counselor said that they were grateful for my escape and that they were going to investigate, but perhaps the transmission was garbled or the ident was garbled. And I said, perhaps. At that point, I just faded away and I returned to my body. So, I know my wife was concerned about me because that day, luckily it was a weekend day, I was not myself. I was still very, I don't know, I probably was a little bit in shock. When you astral project, you expect a lot of very different things and different beings. But being trapped between two supermassive black holes just isn't on my list of number one things that I want to experience. So we'll see what's going to happen. Obviously, if that was some sort of a plot by my friend the master to get rid of me, it failed. And I'm going to have to be extra careful going forward here now because maybe it was an honest mistake somewhere. I can't just eliminate that possibility. But I have my suspicions, obviously. I'd like to hear what you have to think about this experience, and certainly any guys, any Astral Club members who are more well versed on the science of black holes and what have you. I'd be very interested in what you have to say about the experience. My knowledge of it is very superficial, gained through some basic articles and some specials on TV. So I'd certainly be interested in your feedback. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'm always interested in your questions and comments. And if you're interested in contributing to Astral Club on Patreon, there will be a link in the description. And as always, I'm Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.